Welcome to the Penguin Podcast.
Hi, my name is Graeme Simsion, author of the Rosie Project, or as we say in Australia, more euphoniously, the Rosie Project, and I'm here to take over this comedic episode of the Penguin Podcast. Now, from my experience of visiting the folk at Penguin, they're all a happy, smiling lot, which is no wonder with the witty personalities that come in and out of their doors. Some of them feature on today's podcast, which will hopefully leave you with a big smile on your face. For starters, there'll be an interview from a Bonkers comedian turned author, a father and son comedy act, a literary comic genius, and a lovable, flawed school kid. But first, I thought I'd quickly hand over to a good friend of mine, Don Tillman, the lead character of my book, The Rosie Project. Last week, Penguin asked their Twitter following to tweet in their questions to Don, which he has answered and left me to read out to all of you now.
Okay. What's the first thing that you notice about a member of the opposite sex?
I have been accused of noticing their body mass index owing to my frequent references in the Rosie Project, but in fact the first thing I notice is their eyes. This is because I have been advised that I should make eye contact with people, so obviously that's the first thing I do. And thanks to some of the experiences gained during the Rosie Project, I am now increasingly conscious of eye colour and make some assumptions and conclusions regarding the person's parentage and the eye colour of those people.
Don, as someone who devised a very lengthy questionnaire to help you find a wife, how do you feel about shows like Blind Date and Take Me Out, where contestants have just 3 answers or 3 ways to present themselves to find a partner?
Totally inadequate.
I'm cooking lobster tonight. What cocktail would you recommend as a pre-dinner drink?
Obviously an alcoholic cocktail, unless it is one of your non-alcohol nights, which I recommend to at least monthly. But if you're drinking alcohol, an alcoholic cocktail, and I would recommend margarita, world's most popular cocktail, hence most likely to be agreeable to you.
I'm not having much luck finding a boyfriend. What do you recommend?
I recommend you abandon luck as your method of finding a boyfriend and employ a more scientific approach. A detailed questionnaire, a list, a full understanding of what you're looking for, and obviously employ the internet.
Don, what would be your ideal holiday destination?
A place offering superb food and total privacy.
Do you still eat lobster on Tuesday, or have you opened your schedule to try new things?
Owing to the Rosie Project, I am required to abandon the standardised meal system, and therefore I no longer eat lobster every Tuesday. Obviously, it is possible to eat lobster on some Tuesdays, but now I am substituting other things such as crayfish, prawn, crab in the lobster salad.
I'm after suggestions for what to buy my husband this Christmas. Any ideas?
The Rosie Project.
What is your star sign, Don? Might we be compatible?
No.
What are your views on internet dating?
Obviously, the most effective way of finding a partner is to spread the net as widely as possible to maximise the chance of encountering a compatible person. The internet is the appropriate technology for this.
I've been married for 20 years. What are the chances of my husband and I staying together forever?
I'm not a statistician. This information is not immediately available to hand, but I suggest that you consult the relevant statistics, but that you frame your question more carefully. It's highly unlikely your husband and you will stay together forever, if forever is understood to mean the lifetime of the universe, because the earth will shatter. Even if your bones are buried next to each other, there will come a time when in the evolution of the universe this will not be true. If you're asking about lifetimes, you will need to define whose lifetime you are referring to. Frame your question properly and ask again and ask a statistician.
Don, what's the best way to dump someone? Is there a nice way?
You're asking me? You're asking me for advice on tact, on appropriate behaviour. I recommend that you form your own conclusion, which is doubtless going to be more socially appropriate than mine.
What's your favourite thing about the British?
Men of my age dress highly uniformly, therefore there is very little difficulty in fitting in.
Don, if you could have a superpower, other than your existing ones obviously, what would it be?
Very interesting question. The ability to slow down time, or alternatively and equivalently to move faster and think faster than everybody else, which would enable me to make less errors in conversation due to having additional time to think about my response.
What's your idea of a perfect date evening with Rosie?
Unfortunately, the Museum of Natural History is closed in the evenings. Therefore, I would recommend visiting an alternative museum, eating the degustation menu at Momofuku Ko with accompanying wines, an after-dinner cocktail, followed by sex. Thank you to everyone who sent in their questions, but if you missed the chance, fear not, Don is always around to chat and help you with life's hurdles on Twitter. His Twitter handle is at Prof. Don Tillman, ProfDonTillman. And now, on to a comic legend who has spent her entire life making people chuckle, whoop and go bananas. Despite facing some difficult periods in her life, most of all battling the laws of procrastination, Jennifer Saunders has plenty to laugh about, which she discusses with her editor, Joel Rickett.
Hello, Penguin podcasters. I'm Joel Rickett from Penguin, and I'm thrilled to be sitting here with one of my authors, Jennifer Saunders.
Hello, Joel.
Hello. Who's gone and written a book?
Yes, thanks to you.
I wasn't sure how that happened. They said it could never be done.
Well,
You said it could never be done.
I thought it would never be done until I met you at Claire Balding's book launch. That's how it happened. And you persuaded
I
me.
plied you with warm white wine.
Yes.
Incanate.
When I was drunk enough, I agreed to do it.
And then you had to actually write the thing.
Yes, which was quite hard. As you know, it was quite difficult.
Well, it didn't feel like that for me.
Well, no, because you got the end result.
I got the words.
You got the words. I had to think them up.
And you've called it Bonkers.
Yes.
My Life
in Laughs. Yeah.
And it's a fairly bonkers book, isn't it?
It is a fairly bonkers book because it's sort of haphazard. And because my life has never really had a plan. I was going to call it Where's the Plan? Because, in fact, my whole life has been a sort of series of things that just sort of happened.
One after the other.
One after the other, yes,
no
thank God.
Machiavellian scheme
No wormholes.
The comedy world.
No, none at all.
So this is a comedy podcast, so I thought I would start with the dedication in the book, which is a lovely picture of your dad, who is a pilot in the RAF, and the book and the dedication reads, "For my father, who taught me the importance of laughter."
Yes.
How did he do that? Because you tell it very well in the book.
He did it because his whole ethos about life, is ethos the right word?
Something
there?
like that.
It's not bathos or pathos, is it? It's ethos. Was that you were allowed to be serious, but you couldn't take yourself seriously. Therefore, everything had to have something funny around it. And he was a great mimic. He was a great clown. And he was just generally always funny, especially to us kids, you know.
And you I remember there's a great bit when you talk about how he took the mickey, shall we say, out of people who kept their military or RAF titles later in life, and there was a certain Commander Cox.
Commander Cox, yes.
Who lived near you.
Well, because he couldn't bear pomposity. And anybody who thought they could get away in civilian life by keeping their title, like Major so-and-so, when they'd probably only ever been in the army for 2 years, you know, and out for 32, he just used to rip the piss out of. And in front of us kids, this guy would come round. It was called Commander Cox. And he'd go, "Hello, Commander. Commander Cox is here. Look, children. It's Commander. Commander Cox is here. Oh, hello, Commander. Do come in, Commander." Like this. And also, he was very charming. So no one ever sort of realised.
Only you
it was only us. And he'd sort of wink us in on the joke. So we were always being entertained by him. And I remember my parents, wherever they went to a party or if we'd had a family gathering, in the car on the way home, they would just go through everybody and do imitations and character assassinations, and it was just hilarious.
So you just joined in?
So we just joined in, yeah.
But you didn't sort of start kind of performing in any formal sense at school. It wasn't like you were one of these girls up on the stage or you weren't sort of starring in things. You weren't even doing much drama, really.
I don't. We never did drama at school. And we did, I think we once did a review when I was in the sixth form, and I think that was about it. I wasn't in plays. No.
But then you found yourself somehow, by accident almost, on...
Everything was a little bit by accident, yes.
It was actually a teacher training course, but you sort of thought it was a drama course.
Well, I knew it was in London. That was all the knowledge I had, was go to a college in London, here's the address. And And yeah, it turned out to be a teacher training course, which slightly flummoxed me. And we had to do a certain amount of performance, and that's when I started performing, I suppose.
And and that's where you met Dawn, in fact.
Yeah, that's
Dawn
where I met
Frenchie.
Dawn. Dawn French, off the television, was there. And by the third year, we'd worked up an act. Just to entertain ourselves, basically, because we were in a flat with lots of other people and used to get bored. And alcohol was generally too expensive. No money. So we used to eat cheaply, not drink much, and just mess about all the time.
Can you remember your earliest performance in
Oh, yeah.
in that living room?
No, definitely, because there was a sort of square of sofas and everyone would sit down and look at the television, and we'd go in and ask them to stand up, move all the sofas back, and we'd do a mimed circus act in the middle of the room for them, which we thought was hilarious.
This was the
Menopatsi sisters.
Okay.
Who were the next generation on from the Menopause sisters, who were the earlier act.
Yeah.
And we used just to laugh more than the audience, always, and then leave the room in hysterics, and they just, pushed the sofas back and turned the telly back on. But we had such fun.
And it was all, that was it, wasn't it? It was the fun.
It was always the fun, yeah. It was always the fun. I think when you find someone you can have fun with, that you can play with, it's like when you've got a best friend at school, and you always want to be with that person because that's the person you enjoy jokes with. That's the person you don't feel embarrassed in front of. I think that's the most important thing in a comedy relationship, is the person you can't embarrass yourself in front of.
No, because you've got such intimacy and
Yeah.
you've done everything.
Yeah, it's a huge trust thing, I think.
And it did sort of then turn into a real act when you couldn't find a job.
Well, no, I couldn't find a job, and the job didn't find me, and I was sort of indolent and sitting on a step in Chelsea with my friend Jobo, and we used to always go through the stage. Every week we'd get a copy of the stage and have a look through the jobs at the back, and always think, oh, I really, really want a job on a cruise. So like a job on a cruise, because you get to go on the cruise and you get a job. And so we'd always be looking for jobs on cruises. And one day we went through it, and there was this job advertised in a comedy club in Soho, and they wanted female acts because there were so few at the time. And to be right on and to be alternative, you couldn't ignore the fact that actually it couldn't be all male. They had some bosoms.
So you were the token.
So we were the token.
Quota.
We were the token quota. We were the only alive beings that walked into the audition with bosoms and got the
That
job.
was it.
That got the job.
And you started doing in a strip club, actually.
Yeah, it was in a strip club.
The earliest comic strip.
Yeah.
And
we thought it was
going up on
quite
stage every
cool,
night.
actually, to be in Raymond's Review Bar. But then everything in Soho was in a strip club. I mean, the Comedy Store was above a strip club.
Yep.
It was that was the place where there were lots of little venues and stages. So.
And you put on these sort of skits, some of which you, as you say, you developed on the sofa. But then
Yes, we did. I mean, you just put on what we'd done at the college cabaret.
what I love about it is when you said to me it was only after a while that you realised you didn't have to change them every night because it was the audience that changed.
We suddenly thought, my God, we're going on every night. We can't do the same material. That's ridiculous. And so we would try and, every night think up, we've got to do a different thing tomorrow, got to do a different thing tomorrow. And it came down to some pretty tragic material by the end. I mean, Dawn would walk on stage and we'd start acting like Thunderbird's puppets and be walking around the stage like puppets, which was half funny. And I think most people didn't know what we were doing. And then Dawn, I'd say to Dawn, "What's the time, brains?" And she'd put her wrist on her forehead and say, 4 o'clock, Mr. Tracy. And that was the end of the sketch.
Punchline.
So then we just had to go, "Thank you very much, thank you very much, good night."
Are any of these moments captured on film?
No, thank God.
Oh.
No, the
We've
probably
got a
are
great photo
some.
in the book from very early.
Yeah,
haven't we?
there's some very good photos in the book where you just think, what are you wearing? Dawn decided a small pair of tartan trousers and a red T-shirt was her stage outfit, and I decided that a black velour tracksuit that gripped you at the ankles and some peaked toe sandals was my outfit. So there you go.
Fairly hot under those lights in those.
Well, we were young. We didn't notice.
So that, and do you think and some of the characters and the way and the kind of skits and takes on things you did then, did they sort of carry all the way through into the years of French and Saunders?
Yeah, I'm sure they did. Actually, I'm sure we used a lot of our. A lot of it's to do with little attitudes you find, so that you can adapt them into different sketches. And for a long time, we liked being teenagers. We liked the sort of teenage attitude. So we'd write a lot of teenage sketches and old people sketches or something. But I mean, the thing that was the interesting thing to find was the French and Saunders relationship, which we never had in the early days. We'd literally come on, go into a sketch character, say thank you very much at the end of the sketch. There'd be a little few applause like that, and then we go, and now the next sketch, and then get on with that. So there was no act as such. There was just sketches. And once we found the act, I think that was the big breakthrough, really.
And it seems like a different era in terms of when you
it
first came in.
Era,
it actually was a different era, technically.
It was many hundreds of years ago.
But you came into the BBC and just had this extraordinary sort of freedom to keep that rolling, really, and to find your way.
You see, what they did then is they just brought people in who had a certain success and that had, a sort of small following. And they didn't try and adapt you for television. Strip club following. Yes, for old men in Max. And they didn't try and adapt you for the television. They took what you were doing and put it on television. And didn't interfere with you. I mean, it was a very creative place to work in those days. And
they didn't sort of can you if you had one dodgy show or series or something, or you kind of.
No, I think the general thing was, let's see how it goes for one. You're obviously going to be better in two, and the third one will be the great one.
Same applies to books in many cases.
Yes,
not in this one. The first one is the best.
It's only this one, hopefully.
Yeah. We haven't told you about Bonkers 2 yet.
Oh, 2 Bonkers.
2 Bonkers.
2 Bonkers.
This time it's personal. So talking about, let's go all the way forward on the comedy theme through to meeting, and you talk about meeting Dawn and how that, finding someone who can keep the funny going. And was it the same with Joanna Lumley?
Really the same, yeah. It was interesting. And we hadn't had such a big build-up too, because Dawn and I, we sort of knew each other. We were with each other every day at college. And so it was a sort of gradual process of getting to know. But when you, with Joanna, it was very quick because, you were
thrown together
a series. We were thrown together in a series and
I mean, the way that happened was extraordinary. You just had to
I just had to write something and then had to cast it. And I didn't know if I was going to get on with her because I'd never met her, and she had this air of this lovely voice and everything was lovely, lovely. And I thought, I don't know if I'm going to get on with lovely, lovely. But it turns out she's not lovely, lovely at all. Turns out she's pretty fantastic and really funny and very down to earth. And
there's among the many treasures in the book, there's a chapter which is almost entirely composed of the facts that you and Joanna sent to each other when you weren't actually together.
Yeah, we used to send the fax machine, which was like the text of its day.
Okay, tell me, how did that work?
Well, because faxes were suddenly like, did you not know how it works,
no.
dear? All right, it's some paper in a roll,
and you
put your fax in, which you write on a piece of paper, and it comes out the other end. Not your end, your other end. At the other end of the telephone line. So you telephone a letter to people.
You phone a letter.
You phone a letter to people. Okay. And it just became addictive because it's a bit like Twitter, I suppose, which is once you start and you think, I've got to keep being funny now. I've got to find another funny thing to do. And your life is spent looking around the world with your eyes flicking for something funny to put on Twitter. Thinking, I can put that, no, that's not funny enough, it's not funny enough. And the rest of your life means nothing apart from what's funny on Twitter. And it's the same with the faxes. I used to spend days cutting things out, funny things out of magazines, sticking them on bits of paper, writing a few funny things in, and then posting them off in the fax to Joanna. And she'd send them back. And we just had such fun.
Tell us what's in them. You took on characters and
it's generally a character between the two of us, which is I'm Sandwich, who is the sort of someone who thinks she's a big star and has the television show. And Joanna is Jack Lumpley, who is also whatever name she chooses on the day, who is an out-of-work, generally in a home actress who's begging me for work. Honestly, we just used to make ourselves laugh.
And those
all the time.
those are wonderful, but they're not even the funniest faxes in the book, which I think is a title reserved for a series of exchanges between yourself and Ms. Goldie Hawn.
Yes, rather strangely.
Which are sort of unintentionally funny in a way.
Well, they are unintentionally funny, and because they are desperate. Basically, it's me pretending I've done some writing for her that I haven't done, and her begging me to write it.
And you're getting into a sort of series of elaborate metaphors about...
Yes.
Well, first you're making a series of excuses.
So many
incredible excuses.
So many. Some now, I actually blush when I read those. I think, how can you... Honestly, the nerve. And some of them I just decide to talk like Bertie Wooster. And go, hey-ho, tinker-tonk, onwards now, going to oil the old brain and, put the old fingers on the old keyboard, tinkety-tonk, hey-ho.
You get into this elaborate metaphor towards the end about you're in labour and the baby's kind of, and you're in the advanced stages.
I'm just trying to keep it light. I think that's the thing, is you just want to keep it all tinkety-tonk, because really it's rather sad and very, very desperate by then. Because we just didn't do the work. We just didn't do the work.
And it would have been probably easier to do it than to actually write
This
these
was a
faxes.
project that Ruby Wax said, Jennifer, we can do it in a month. And a year and a half later, it was no further forward.
Well, thankfully not all your writing projects end like that.
No, because some of them come in on time, don't they, Joel?
They do.
Thank you.
Including Bonkers.
Bonkers!
So
Hurrah.
thank you, Jennifer.
Oh, pleasure.
That was Jennifer Saunders talking about her autobiography, Bonkers, which is out now. Now, from one half of a comedy duo to a full comedy double act. Many of you will be familiar with Jack Whitehall, and some of you may also know that his father, Michael Whitehall, has been an agent to acting legends from Judi Dench to Colin Firth. What you might not all know is that together they tell a hugely entertaining and irreverent account of a unique relationship between a father and a son. Here they are introducing an extract from their book, Him and Me.
Hello, I'm Jack Whitehall.
And I'm Michael Whitehall.
And you're listening to the Penguin Podcast.
Podcast? What's a podcast?
It's an online thing that you download and you listen to people. And it's the Penguin. But I'll play it to you later.
It's nothing to do with peas.
What? No, shh. It's to do with computers, so just ignore it.
Right.
For this special comedy episode, I wanted to introduce you to my book, Him
What
and
is
Me.
What do you mean, your book?
Well, it's my book.
It's not your book. I've written half of it. You've written half of it. It's our book.
Yeah, but
It's not all sort of me, this
I'm not
book.
saying it's all me.
It's about you and me.
Yes, okay.
I mean, to be honest, this is just my personal opinion. I think the chapters I've written are a slightly different class to the ones that you've written. I mean, they've got a sort of literary feel to them. I mean, somebody like, I don't know, Joanna Trollope or something, if she was going through the book, I know which chapters she'd like.
Probably my one.
Whereas yours would be good for people like Paul Potts, is that the man?
Yeah, he's in it. I've got lots of people that I reference in my things that young people would like. There's a story about Ollie Murs.
Yes, exactly. But it's more that kind of world. You're the Ollie Murs world, and I'm more the Ollie...
Ollie Reed?
Ollie Reed world, yes.
Do you even know who Ollie Murs is?
Yes, he's a nice boy. He's that boy we met in Essex when you did that show up in Essex.
Yeah.
Quite pleased with himself, but a
Don't
nice
say,
boy.
you can't say that about Ollie Murs.
And doesn't Molly, your sister Molly, isn't she quite fancy Ollie
Yeah, she
Murs?
quite fancies him.
Yeah,
In fact, I think she's quite keen on Ollie Reed as well.
Yeah.
Well, she was. Okay, well, now they're going to play an extract from our book.
Which extract do we use?
I don't know.
I would suggest we use one of mine.
Why do you keep saying that? My
Well,
chapters are fine.
Who's going to decide what extract?
The listeners will decide, I guess.
Yeah, so-
Maybe they'll get given an option and they can vote for which one they listen to.
Right.
Vote me. Here's the extract.
From a very early age, Jack adored, and I mean adored, dressing up. Captain Scarlet, Troy Tempest, Aladdin, Robin Hood, dinosaurs, Captain Hook, Peter Pan, Power Rangers, medieval knights, medieval kings, wizards, vampires, and rather worryingly, the Little Mermaid.
Her name is Ariel.
The one thing that linked all these characters, at least when Jack was portraying them, was that they all wore tights. Fireman Sam is a fireman, I told Jack one day, and I think it very unlikely that he would wear tights. It fell on deaf ears. Worse still, Hilary often had to make these costumes. There was one Christmas when she spent weeks wrestling with meters of pink satin and gold lame, running up a Power Ranger suit. Why did it have to be the pink one?
Because Kimberly was by far the coolest Power Ranger.
Do you think this is wise, Hilary? I asked her. You'll turn the boy into Liberace. When she wasn't at the sewing machine, she would be on the phone, often in tears, to Wuss, who at this stage was working as a social worker in a child guidance clinic, so was good for a bit of advice on Jack's foibles. How can I get him to stop wearing tights? Hilary would ask. He'll grow out of it, Wuss would reassure her. Yes, but when? Little did we know how long it would take.
24 years and counting. Wearing them now.
Many a family...
As is my father.
Many a family...
Suspenders. And a bra. We're both wearing them. It was a bet. Do you want to concur, father? Take his silence as acceptance.
I have no intention of dignifying those remarks with a response. Many a family occasion was ruined before we'd even left the house. There was a memorable pre-party crisis when Jack insisted that Hilary make his hair look just like Scott Tracy's from Thunderbirds. After several fruitless attempts and gallons of hair product, Hilary explained to a now inconsolable Jack that she was never going to be able to get it looking exactly like Scott Tracy's hair, as Scott Tracy was a puppet.
Still not an excuse that I think holds up. Such a quitter, my mother.
Jack didn't only confine his penchant for dressing up to himself. Frequently he would insist that all members of the family joined in. On one occasion our friend Anne Mullins, Molly's godmother, was made to dress up as Darth Vader.
Darth Vader.
Is he called Darth
Vader?
Vader?
Are you serious?
Yeah.
You don't know how... It's Darth Vader.
Oh, right.
Darth Vader.
Oh, V-A-D-E-R, Var.
Vader. Hello, this is Darth Vader.
Was made to
How
dress
much
up.
less scary would he be if his name was Darth Vader?
Was made to dress up as Darth Vader because he didn't have enough baddies to scare people. Then there was the party when he insisted that his elderly grandparents don pirate outfits, and I myself was once forced to dress up
Asked politely.
Forced to dress up properly as a clown before I was allowed through the doors of one of Barnaby's parties, which in retrospect was a bit of an error as the entertainer was running late and everyone looked at me to step into the breach. It wasn't going to happen. The children all seemed to find it very amusing. I didn't. Still, they weren't laughing for long, as moments later Timmy Twinkle arrived and quickly knocked them into shape with a trick that involved him picking out a particularly annoying child from his young audience and putting him in a cupboard.
Seriously, that was the trick. This man is a monster.
The children were subdued for the rest of the party.
They were probably traumatised for the rest of their lives. You also haven't mentioned the party where I came dressed as Luke Skywalker.
Right, very, very funny. One of the first and most...
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Right, can I carry on, please?
Yes, so I'll stop making silly Star Wars jokes.
One of the first and most spectacular costumes Jack ever wore was courtesy of his cousin Graeme. Graeme worked as a footman at Buckingham Palace. Jack was very keen to meet the Queen, so he and his siblings joined Hilary and me on a backstairs visit that Graeme had arranged for us. However, before our visit could be confirmed, we had to go through endless security checks to prove that we were fit and proper people. There was a 10-page questionnaire to complete, and we had to send in copies of our passports. No problem for Hilary and the children, but I was a little concerned for myself, as in all passport photographs for many years, I've always resembled a Nazi war criminal who has chosen to settle in London rather than Buenos Aires.
Because obviously that's the last thing they'd want in Buckingham Palace, someone with German ancestry.
If you're going to make sort of cheap, sarky, racist remarks about the royal family, I'm going to walk out of here.
Okay, sorry, Father. By the way, the only reason you look like a Nazi war criminal in those passport photos is because you insist on wearing that SS uniform. If you stop wearing it, then you won't look like a Nazi war criminal. Wear the suspenders that you're wearing now, and no one would think that. Or maybe your Darth Vader costume.
Once we had been given the green light, we arranged a date. Graeme met us at the staff entrance of the palace. His tour started with a visit to the kitchens on the basis that we would work our way up the building, starting from the bottom. In the kitchen we met a Mrs. Patmore look-alike, who showed us the system for letting the staff know which royals were in and which were out for each meal. This seemed to consist of lots of little magnetic name tags. There were 2 lifts outside the kitchen with a sign on one saying not to be used between 12 noon and 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. when the Queen is in residence. Graeme explained that this lift was used to take up the Queen's lunch and dinner and bring it down again when she'd finished, so no one was allowed to use it in case they tampered with her food. I could see Jack trying to work out how he could get involved in this process. Next, we found ourselves in a sewing room which had floor-to-ceiling shelves full of beautifully pressed linens. Another Mrs. Patmore look-alike, is there an agency that supplies these kind of people, was sitting on a bentwood chair darning a pair of socks that she told Jack belonged to Prince Philip. "You never darn my socks," I said to Hilary. "If you want to get your socks darned, get yourself a housekeeper," she replied helpfully. There then followed a seminal moment when the children got as close to the Queen as they were going to on this visit.
She walked into the sewing room brandishing a broken bra strap and went, "Oh, that Prince Philip will be the death of me."
Just stop all these ludicrous things and remarks and everything. I'm trying to tell this story, and it's an interesting story involving the royal family. Okay?
Yep. That was From Him and Me, which you can download now. Hope you enjoyed
Just
it.
download me. Down what?
I'll explain.
Okay. Download away.
That was Jack and Michael Whitehall introducing an extract from the audiobook edition of Him and Me, which is available now. Going to head back to Don now with his account of the infamous apricot ice cream disaster. Daters be warned.
Jean and Claudia tried for a while to assist me with the wife problem. Unfortunately, their approach was based on the traditional dating paradigm, which I had previously abandoned on the basis that the probability of success did not justify the effort and negative experiences. I am 39 years old, tall, fit and intelligent, with a relatively high status and above-average income as an associate professor. Logically, I should be attractive to a wide range of women. In the animal kingdom, I would succeed in reproducing. However, there is something about me that women find unappealing. I have never found it easy to make friends, and it seems that the deficiencies that cause this problem have also affected my attempts at romantic relationships. The apricot ice cream disaster is a good example. Claudia had introduced me to one of her many friends. Elizabeth was a highly intelligent computer scientist with a vision problem that had been corrected with glasses. I mentioned the glasses because Claudia showed me a photograph and asked me if I was okay with them. An incredible question from a psychologist. In evaluating Elizabeth's suitability as a potential partner, someone to provide intellectual stimulation, to share activities with, perhaps even to breed with, Claudia's first concern was my reaction to her choice of glasses frames, which was probably not even her own but the result of advice from an optometrist. This is the world I have to live in. Then Claudia told me, as though it was a problem, she has very firm ideas. Are they evidence-based? I guess so, Claudia said. Perfect. She could have been describing me. We met at a Thai restaurant. Restaurants are minefields for the socially inept, and I was nervous as always in these situations. but we got off to an excellent start when we both arrived at exactly 7 p.m. as arranged. Poor synchronisation is a huge waste of time. We survived the meal without her criticising me for any social errors. It is difficult to conduct a conversation while wondering whether you are looking at the correct body part, but I locked onto her bespectacled eyes as recommended by Jean. This resulted in some inaccuracy in the eating process, which she did not seem to notice. On the contrary, we had a highly productive discussion about simulation algorithms. She was so interesting. I could already see the possibility of a permanent relationship. The waiter brought the dessert menus and Elizabeth said, "I don't like Asian desserts." This was almost certainly an unsound generalisation, based on limited experience, and perhaps I should have recognised it as a warning sign. But it provided me with an opportunity for a creative suggestion. We could get an ice cream across the road. Great idea, as long as they've got apricot. I assessed that I was progressing well at this point and did not think the apricot preference would be a problem. I was wrong. The ice cream parlour had a vast selection of flavours, but they had exhausted their supply of apricot. I ordered a chocolate chilli and licorice double cone for myself and asked Elizabeth to nominate her second preference. If they haven't got apricot, I'll pass. I couldn't believe it. All ice cream tastes essentially the same, due to chilling of the taste buds. This is especially true of fruit flavours. I suggested mango. No thanks, I'm fine. I explained the physiology of taste bud chilling in some detail. I predicted that if I purchased a mango and peach ice cream, she would be incapable of differentiating, and by extension, either would be equivalent to apricot. They're completely different, she said. If you can't tell mango from peach, that's your problem. Now we had a simple objective disagreement that could readily be resolved experimentally. I ordered a minimum size ice cream in each of the two flavours, but by the time the serving person had prepared them and I turned to ask Elizabeth to close her eyes for the experiment, she had gone. So much for evidence-based and for computer scientist. Afterwards, Claudia advised me that I should have abandoned the experiment prior to Elizabeth leaving. Obviously, but at what point? Where was the signal? These are the subtleties I failed to see. But I also failed to see why heightened sensitivity to obscure cues about ice cream flavours should be a prerequisite for being someone's partner. It seems reasonable to assume that some women do not require this. Unfortunately, the process of finding them is impossibly inefficient. The apricot ice cream disaster had cost a whole evening of my life, compensated for only by the information about simulation algorithms.
That was an extract from The Rosie Project, audiobook with Dan O'Grady as the voice of Don Tillman. Next, we have another father and son combo who made their debut in Catherine O'Flynn's charming novel Mr. Lynch's Holiday, about a father who goes to visit his son living in Spain, only to find that his son's life is not quite as he expected. Here's the author Catherine O'Flynn telling us her reasons for setting her story in Spain.
I think there were two starting points for the place. One was that my husband and I actually went to live out in Spain in the early 2000s. We didn't go to live in a crumbling development, we went to live in Barcelona, so it was very different. But at the same time, there was that sense of this slight arrogance of thinking, well, life's quite good in England, but could be even better in Barcelona. Why not we move there? And very quickly realising that the beauty becomes invisible very quickly, and the idea of life without work and this immense freedom actually becomes quite isolating, and it starts to send you slightly unhinged in various ways after a little while. And it turned out okay for me. I wrote my first novel there and it was okay, but I got a glimpse of that kind of, you can't just buy happiness or geographically locate happiness. And then a few years later, we actually went on holiday to Spain, to a different part of Spain. And it was a deserted ghost town. It was a place for second homeowners, and it was out of season. So the only people there really were myself, my husband, I think 2 shopkeepers, and lots of feral cats. And it was so eerie walking around at night, and the whole atmosphere of the place was very haunting. And one evening there was a power cut that lasted for a few hours. And it was just amazing to me how quickly I just crumbled and my paranoia started mounting. And I thought, they don't know we're here. Nobody knows we're here. They're never going to turn the power back on. We're going to have to eat the cats. We're going to die here. And it was those two things really that sort of stayed with me, that I thought, I think I want to write about something to do with those themes.
But what you did was transpose those themes into the internal world of the characters as well. The Mr. Lynch, the title, is Irish, but lived most of his adult life in Birmingham.
Yeah.
We have his son, who's decided again to chase the dream, but he's lost a part of himself in the process. All the other expats share a similar sense of dislocation, and I wondered about the personal rather than the geographic element that you were hoping to explore.
I think I was really interested in looking at those two types of migration, really. Well, various types of migration, but particularly the contrast between Dermot, who left Ireland for England in search of, a better a way of surviving, really, staking his place in the world, and Eamon, who moves to Spain really just because out of a sense of entitlement to greater personal happiness, and the kind of the massive divide between those two generations. There's always a divide between generations, but I think sometimes it can be greater than others, particularly if you're the child of immigrant child, or if you're the child of quite an elderly parent, and which are both true of Dermot. And so Eamon has grown up one of those very awkward, self-hating member of the middle class. He's moved up a sort of the social scale, and he's no longer comfortable with the kind of the background into which he was born, nor the sort of milieu that he now mixes in, and he just feels constantly assuaged by feelings of anxiety and guilt and awkwardness. And I can identify with that. I know a lot of my friends are like that, and it's something that somehow I think doesn't get explored that much. That kind of real, they're ridiculous characters. Eamon cannot. He has no useful skills whatsoever. His main skill is just anxiety and neurosis, whereas his father is this incredibly capable man who has very little anxiety about his place in the world or his relationships with other people. And I just thought I liked the idea of writing a story about a strong parent rescuing a weaker child, but that the strong parent was an elderly man and the weaker child was like an adult male. I thought it would kind of be quite interesting to set it like that.
The other noticeable thing I felt was that it's almost exclusively male. Eamon's girlfriend Laura, who seems an absolutely delightful character, scarcely appears as Inga as well, who again is secondary, and that was intriguing as well, to tell the story so clearly from the position from the point of view of two wheels. Was that a deliberate choice on your part in advance? Do you say I wanted to tell it, or just this is what men are like and I can get there?
I'm not sure how deliberate it was. I think I thought it actually doesn't play that big a part in my considerations when I'm thinking. It's a strange thing, but I don't actually. I never really think about, I'm going to write about a male character or a female character. I don't have any problem writing male characters, which isn't to say I write them amazingly well, but it just means that I don't think my characters succeed or fail on the basis of whether they're male or female. And I think I wanted to write about father and son here because that process of migration, it's often, in the first place, the man's story, isn't it? They're the ones who will go over abroad, and maybe the wife will come over later or bring their families over. And I suppose to some extent, when I started thinking about the kind of person that Eamon was and compared to his father, there were quite a lot of issues about masculinity that I thought it might be interesting to explore. So it ended up, and there might even be an element of, I wanted, I'm the child of, an elderly Irish father, and it's not about me or my dad, and so it's a way of distancing it and getting for me, a little bit of perspective on it by shifting it slightly.
Did that succeed, or did you find yourself creeping and your father seeping through?
I think I managed to get them quite separate. I was worried that Dermot could turn into my father, but he didn't, because Dermot's brilliant at DIY and my father was atrocious, and Dermot's far more capable really than my dad ever was.
But actually, though, that point, though, in fact, that's not the point about the characters. It's not that Dermot is capable at DIY or that Eamon is not doing a useful job. It's that the whole story hinges on the kind of the nature of their personalities.
Yeah.
Rather than their sort of skills and attributes. It's not their CV that defines them.
No, you're absolutely right. I think, it just occurred to me that, and it's true of all of us, I think, with some exceptions, that we grow up very incurious about our parents. They're completely part of the background, and largely invisible. Just as I'm talking about the beauty of moving abroad becomes invisible. I think our parents are invisible to us for a large part. And obviously Dermot is not necessarily the type of man who grew up having a great role in his son's life. He was out working, it was that generation. And so really they don't really know each other very well at all. And I think Eamon is aware vaguely that Dermot's quite a strong character, but he doesn't see his vulnerabilities. And similarly, Dermot is aware that Eamon is a little bit flaky, but he doesn't see his sort of more his more nobler side as well. So you're right. It was it was exploring the difference between them and the fact they just don't really know each other very well at all.
It is layered throughout with moments of really poignant sadness, as well as this rather dark, bleak humour. And I should also say there's some just laugh out loud funny stuff in there as well. I'm sort of interested in the process there. Do you think structurally about this and say, OK, if this is going to work, we need to have this here and this here and this here? Or does it flow, or does it grow as you're writing?
I don't think at all about balancing the sort of the light and dark. I find that just very natural. To me, that's I think that's just the way I perceive the world, that it's kind of a mixture of comedy and tragedy. And so I'm never really conscious of thinking, oh, okay, I'll put a sad bit here and a funny bit here, or a attempt at a funny bit here. I think I do sort of plan the structure quite a bit in advance, but not with that really in mind, not so much the sort of the light and shade in mind.
Well, except that I'm clearly not going to give away the ending, but you make a decision about the ending. And
yeah.
At some point you have to say, well, this is the way this is going to go.
Oh,
This is the feeling that you're going to get at the end of this book.
Yeah.
Do you know that from the start?
Yes, I do. I'm kind of one of those. I'm not at all one of those writers who says, I sit down and I let the characters take me on a journey. It's not. I am taking the characters on a journey. I am pushing them along every inch of the way to their ultimate destination, which I've decided. I'm not able to write not knowing where it's going to end up. What I do is I have a sort of pretty good idea of the plot, which obviously changes a lot over time. All kinds of things change and mutate. But when I write it, I don't write it in order. It comes out in all kinds of strange sequences, and then I have a horrible job at the end trying to piece it all together. But I do sort of know where I'm headed all the way through it, or at various points, and it shifts.
That was Catherine O'Flynn talking about her latest book, Mr. Lynch's Holiday, which is out now. We now have an audiobook extract from the 7th book in the hugely popular Wimpy Kid series, The Third Wheel. Greg Heffley may not be perfect, but what pubescent kid is. Here he is.
It took a long time, but eventually I did learn to walk, and before I knew it, I was in preschool. I was hoping I'd have a head start over the other kids because of all the work Mom had put in with the classical music and the educational DVDs. But the other moms must have done that stuff too, because the competition in preschool was pretty stiff. I mean, you had kids in there who knew how to use buttons and zippers when I could barely figure out how to pull off my mittens without help from a grown-up. A few of my classmates could write their own names, and 1 or 2 could count all the way to 50. I knew I couldn't keep up, so I decided to try and slow everyone else down by feeding them bad information. My plan kind of backfired, though, and my preschool teacher told Mom I wasn't learning my colors and shapes like the other kids. But Mom said I was smart, and that maybe the problem was I wasn't being challenged enough. So Mom actually took me out of preschool and had me skip a grade to kindergarten. But that decision was a total disaster. The kids in kindergarten seemed like giants to me, and they knew how to do stuff like cut with scissors and color inside the lines. I didn't even make it a whole day in kindergarten before the teacher had to call Mom to come get me. The next day, Mom brought me back to preschool and asked the teacher if I could have my cubby back. I just hope your academic record doesn't follow you around, because it might be tough for me to get a good job later on if people find out I was a kindergarten dropout.
That was an extract from the audiobook edition of Wimpy Kid, The Third Wheel, which is out now. For all Wimpy Kid fans out there, the 8th book in the series, Hard Luck, is out on 6th November, and you can find out more at www.wimpykidclub.co.uk. Before I sign off, Don did write down some personal thoughts for me to share with you. So here are Don's thoughts on comedy. Greetings. As part of my contractual obligation to contribute to the marketing of the Rosie Project, my case study of human attraction, bizarrely illustrated with an Atlantic lobster, I am required to speak for 2 minutes on comedy. Another ludicrous request. Obviously, the marketing person gave zero consideration to my qualifications in the field. My work focuses on the genetic basis of susceptibility to cirrhosis of the liver in mice, which is unrelated to humour. Obviously, it would be more efficient to have a comedy expert deliver this lecture, while I continued my research uninterrupted. I predict at least one listener will die from cirrhosis in the future as a direct result of the delay. My comedy qualifications are limited to being the cause of unintended laughter. Asking for an analysis of what produces that laughter is approximately equivalent to asking the mice why they are white. Approximately, because as a human I am able to do research, which in this case required 3 hours and 12 minutes. This was to be expected, but probably not by marketing people. Result of research? Laughter appears to be an evolved reaction to the unexpected and a means of dealing with the resulting discomfort. However, not all unexpected events cause laughter. Obvious example, the disruption to my schedule caused by this promotional activity, which caused annoyance rather than laughter. My hypothesis is that the discomfort needs to be more fundamental and bring into doubt a person's understanding of reality or their habitual behaviour. Hence the reason I generate laughter. My observations of behaviour are unexpected but totally rational. If someone says, "Tell me something I didn't know," and I reply with an interesting educational fact, they laugh because the correct rational meaning of what they have said has been pointed out to them. Their amusement at the standardised meal system increases as I list the advantages and they realise the incredible inefficiency of their own approach to nutrition. And if I respond exactly and correctly to a request which has been made of me, 2 minutes is completed. And that's it from the Penguin Podcast. Don't forget to head to the Penguin Books SoundCloud page for other author readings and audiobook extracts at www.soundcloud.com/penguin-books. To find out more about the authors and books featured in this episode, visit the website, thepenguinpodcast.co.uk. And if you have any comments or suggestions, you can email them to podcast@uk.penguingroup.com or find them on Twitter @penguinpodcast. And don't forget to follow Don Tillman @Prof Don Tillman with 2 L's.
You've been listening to the Penguin Podcast.